What would you do if a retired police dog stopped at an ordinary suitcase and what you found inside forced you to question everything you thought you knew about justice, motherhood, and second chances? It was supposed to be just another quiet Monday at Riverston Transit. Fog drifted lazily over the parking lot, wrapping sleepy commuters in a soft grey hush. People clutched their coffee cups and checked their phones, waiting for buses that always ran 10 minutes late. Nothing ever happened in Riverstone, until it did. Officer Rachel Carter leaned against her patrol car, half a protein bar in one hand and a leash in the other. At her side stood Shadow, her partner, a retired military K9 with a salt and pepper coat and a silent, unshakable presence. He wasn't just any dog. Shadow had served 2 tours overseas, trained to detect bombs, alert to human life, and throw himself between danger and the people he loved. These days, he worked on light patrols under a new city program, easing back into civilian life like a soldier learning to breathe again. Rachel, herself a veteran, knew what that felt like. She and Shadow didn't talk much, but they didn't need to. Their bond was the kind that ran deeper than words. The loudspeaker crackled overhead. A toddler squealed somewhere in the distance, chasing pigeons across the concrete. Teenagers bickered over earbuds. Somewhere, someone's travel mug clanged against a bench. Everything was normal, until it wasn't. Shadow froze. Rachel noticed it immediately. One moment he was walking beside her, relaxed but alert. The next, his entire body stiffened, ears up, tail rigid, nostrils flaring. "Shadow?" she said quietly, her hand tightening on the leash. The dog didn't respond. He growled. Not a low, lazy warning, but a deep, primal sound Rachel hadn't heard since his deployment. The kind of growl that made your stomach twist before your brain knew why. He moved suddenly, pulling Rachel forward with surprising force for an aging dog. His nose was low, locked onto something near the far bench at the edge of the platform. A tattered maroon suitcase. Rachel narrowed her eyes. It didn't look dangerous, just scuffed, one wheel broken, no tag. The kind of luggage you'd see rolling behind a tired college student or an exhausted traveler who missed their connection, but no one was near it. And Shadow wasn't acting like it was ordinary. He began to scratch, not in the playful, pawing way dogs sometimes do. This was urgent, desperate, as if he knew something inside was alive. Rachel's instincts, sharpened by years of both war and patrol, kicked in. "Transit control," she radioed. "This is Officer Carter. I need immediate platform clearance. Potential threat. Repeat, clear the platform." The voice on the other end didn't question her. By now, several heads had turned. A security guard looked at her with concern. "Bomb threat?" "Could be," Rachel said, eyes never leaving the suitcase. "Could be worse," Shadow barked once sharp, commanding. Rachel took a step forward. "Stay," she told him. But he didn't stay. He let out a soft whine and scratched again, then suddenly stopped and sat completely still, staring at the suitcase like it was haunted. Rachel felt the chill crawl up her spine. That pose rigid, focused, was Shadow's signal for human life detected. Her pulse quickened. This wasn't just a suspicious package. This was something else, something alive. The platform was nearly empty now. Rachel crouched beside Shadow, resting a steadying hand on her sidearm. "Talk to me, boy," she whispered. Then she heard it. A sound so faint she thought she imagined it. A whimper. She looked around. Nothing. Then again. A soft, muffled sob. Her throat tightened. It wasn't an adult's voice, and it wasn't an animal. It was a child. Shadow let out another whine, pressing closer to the suitcase, like he couldn't bear the distance between them. Rachel's heart pounded in her ears. Protocol said, "Wait." Bomb squad was still at least 10 minutes out, but every second now felt like too long. Her instincts screamed louder than any training manual. Then the suitcase moved just a twitch, barely noticeable, but enough. Rachel stood. "Everyone stay back," she shouted. "Do not approach." She knelt, reached for the zipper. Shadow didn't growl this time. He stayed close, breathing slow and focused, like he was anchoring her. The zipper rasped open with a reluctant screech. What hit her first wasn't the sight, it was the smell. Sweat, cloth, duct tape. Then she saw it. A tiny pink and yellow sneaker, a small curled figure, eyes wide and terrified. A little boy, no older than 4. His mouth was taped. His wrists bound, knees pulled to his chest like a turtle retreating into a shell. But he was alive. Rachel gasped, yanking off the tape, pulling him into her arms. He didn't cry, he didn't speak. He just trembled, pressed into her as if she was the only safe thing left in the world. Shadow stepped forward and gently licked the boy's hand. The boy blinked. Rachel's voice cracked as she reached for her radio. "This is Carter," she said. "We have a live child." "Repeat alive. Request ambulance and trauma response. I am holding the child now." The boy looked up at her with hollow, confused eyes. Rachel whispered, "You're safe now, sweetheart. We've got you." Shadow didn't look away. Not once. And in that moment, Rachel knew. This wasn't just a rescue. This was the beginning of something much, much deeper. The ambulance arrived in under 3 minutes. By then, Rachel Carter was kneeling on the concrete of the Riverstone transit platform, cradling the boy against her chest like he might vanish if she let go. His body was cold, stiff, trembling, but he was breathing, alive. He didn't cry, he didn't scream, he didn't say a word. His eyes, wide and dark, stared past her, not with panic, but with something older, something far too heavy for a child that small. Shadow, Rachel's retired canine partner, stayed at her side, his amber eyes locked on the boy, ears flicking with every sound, posture calm but alert. When the paramedics tried to step in, the dog let out a low, steady growl. "Easy," Rachel whispered, placing a hand on his shoulder. "They're here to help." Shadow relented, but didn't leave. The boy clutched her sleeve as they loaded him onto the stretcher. Not roughly, not in desperation, just quietly. Like her presence was the only thread tethering him to this world. Rachel climbed into the back of the ambulance without asking permission. Shadow jumped in beside her. No one argued. At St. Mary's Pediatric ER, the trauma team rushed into motion the moment the doors opened. Vitals. E4. Warming blankets. Quiet, professional urgency. Rachel followed as far as she could until the authorized personnel-only line stopped her. She stayed behind. Shadow didn't. He whined and tried to push forward, only stopping when Rachel knelt beside him. "You did good," she whispered, brushing her fingers through his fur. "You found him. Let them take care of him now." But Shadow wouldn't lie down. He stood like a statue, eyes locked on the hallway where the boy had disappeared. Rachel didn't try to stop him. She let him stand guard. The waiting room smelled like burnt coffee and antiseptic. Rachel sat in a stiff plastic chair, arms crossed, still in her uniform. Her phone buzzed with questions from the precinct, the press, dispatch. She ignored them all. A muted news report flickered on a wall-mounted TV. The headline crawled across the screen. "Boy found in suitcase at Riverstone Transit. Suspect at large." They never got it right. They talked about the incident like it was a breaking story, but they didn't talk about the look in his eyes. They didn't talk about how it felt to unzip a suitcase and find a life inside. "Officer Carter?" Rachel stood as Dr. Evelyn Howard, the lead ER physician, approached. "He's stable," the doctor said. "Dehydrated, hypothermic, bruising on the wrists and ankles consistent with prolonged restraint. No internal injuries, no broken bones." Rachel exhaled slowly. "Has he said anything?" Dr. Howard hesitated. "No, not a word. He flinches at loud sounds but responds to soft touch."
He hasn't made eye contact with anyone until now. Rachel blinked. Now? He moved his eyes when I said your name.
And when I mentioned your dog, she was allowed into the hospital room 10 minutes later. The boy was curled on the bed in a hospital gown that looked too big for his tiny frame. His arms were tucked close to his chest, the way a turtle might fold itself into its shell. Rachel moved slowly, careful not to startle him. Shadow padded in behind her, silent as ever. "Hey," she said gently, kneeling beside the bed. "Remember me?" The boy didn't speak, but his eyes flicked toward her then, toward the dog. "This is Shadow," she continued. "He helped find you today." At the sound of his name, Shadow moved closer and placed his chin softly on the edge of the mattress. The boy's fingers twitched. Then, slowly, so slowly, he reached out and touched the dog's ear. Rachel bit the inside of her cheek to keep the tears in. That tiny gesture said more than 1,000 words. He trusted the dog, which meant there was still something whole inside him. Back at the station, Detective Logan Pierce was already reviewing surveillance footage. He called Rachel 2 hours later. "You're not going to like this," he said. "I already don't," she muttered. "We got footage from the platform cameras, time-stamped 5:42 a.m. Someone left the suitcase under the bench. Grey hoodie, no clear face. No license plate, just a bus pulling away. Anything else?" Logan paused. "One thing. The person in the hoodie had a bracelet, pink and white, homemade. Left wrist." Rachel furrowed her brow. "So we're thinking female? Maybe. Or someone trying hard to look like one. Either way, no ID match. Whoever this is, they're not in the system." Rachel stared out the hospital window. "You think she's still in town?" "Doubt it," Logan said. "That bus headed eastbound. She could be anywhere by now." That night, Rachel brought Shadow home. She sat on her worn couch with a mug of tea gone cold, her mind spinning in 1,000 directions. She kept seeing the boy's face, those eyes, that silence, that trust. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. "Text only. I did what I had to. He's safer now." "Don't look for me." Rachel froze. "No number." "No name, no trace, just those 3 lines." She read them again and again. "I did what I had to. He's safer now." "Don't look for me." She looked at Shadow. The dog growled low and deep, not at her, but at the door. Someone had been there. She stood slowly, her hand resting on her service pistol. "Shadow," she whispered. "Where is it?" The dog turned, nose to the floor, following a scent only he could detect. He led her to the front porch. There, on the steps, sat a plain brown package. No label, no tape, just a box. Inside, a crayon drawing of a boy and a dog, a small pink sock, a photo of the boy peaceful sleeping, surrounded by stuffed animals, and a note, printed in careful block letters. "I kept him safe. Now it's your turn." Rachel's chest tightened. This wasn't a threat. It was a passing of the torch, a silent plea from a stranger who had done everything she could and could do no more. Rachel Carter stood at the window of the pediatric ICU, arms crossed, jaw tight. Inside the hospital room, the little boy Noah slept curled up on a fresh set of white sheets, a stuffed bear resting under one arm. Machines beeped softly around him. A nurse adjusted his IV and dimmed the lights. Shadow lay at the doorway like a stone statue, eyes never straying far from Noah. The boy hadn't spoken since whispering that one word, Scout. He hadn't cried, laughed, or asked for anyone. He hadn't told them his name. Rachel had seen trauma before, kids too broken to scream. But this was different. Noah didn't just seem scared, he seemed erased. At first light, Rachel returned to the precinct. She sat at her desk, fatigue pressing down on her bones. Her partner, Detective Logan Pierce, was already there, coffee in one hand, photos and documents splayed across his desk. I ran every angle, Logan said without preamble. No match in the state missing children's database. Nothing in the national one either. Rachel blinked. What do you mean, nothing? I mean, he said, sliding over a tablet, no birth certificate, no pediatric records, no school enrollment, no vaccinations, no daycare, nothing. She scrolled through the screen. Every query they'd run returned the same thing. No records found. It was as if Noah had never existed. Rachel leaned back, staring at the ceiling. You ever get the feeling, she said, that someone's been hiding him in plain sight for years? Logan nodded. Not just hiding. Protecting. Off-grid. Intentional. She thought back to the box left on her porch. The note, the drawing, the photo of a sleeping boy on a couch surrounded by toys. He hadn't looked scared in that picture. He'd looked safe, and that changed everything. Later that afternoon, Rachel sat in a quiet meeting room with Dr. Evelyn Howard, the lead ER physician who had overseen Noah's initial intake. We ran a tox screen, the doctor said, flipping through paperwork. Nothing unusual, no sedatives, no narcotics, no trace chemicals. Rachel nodded. So he wasn't drugged? No, Evelyn said. But we found something else. She passed over a thin file. He's not registered in any public school system across the Tri-County area. No dental history, no insurance claims, no past ER visits. There are no photographs of him in any public system, not even old class photos. You're saying, Rachel began, no one ever enrolled him in school? Took him to a public doctor? Evelyn met her gaze evenly. I'm saying he's been raised entirely off the grid. Rachel sat back, the weight of it sinking in. Someone had kept this boy hidden, not neglected, not abandoned, but invisible. Why? Back at the station, Logan had cleared a wall in the squad room. Taped up maps, bus routes, photo stills from security footage, all led back to the maroon suitcase. Now a symbol of mystery and horror. In the center was a note in red ink. Not the first time. Rachel raised an eyebrow. What's that supposed to mean? Logan handed her a small plastic baggie. Found this tucked inside the inner lining of the suitcase, he said, buried deep in the stitching. Rachel held it up. A small torn piece of fabric, the corner of a name tag. Faded letters barely visible. Emma Hollis. Rachel's eyes narrowed. You think that's his name? It's a start, Logan said. Either it belonged to him, or to whoever put him in there. She grabbed her laptop and typed it into every known database. One hit. Just one. Buried in a third-tier legacy welfare system. Name, Noah Hollis. DOB, unknown. Status, protective custody transfer. 2019. Case ID, redacted. Guardian, Rains, Grace. Maternal relative, non-custodial. Caseworker, Henley, J. Status, closed. Discontinued. Rachel's heart dropped. He had a case file, she whispered. They took him into protective custody, then closed it. Logan ran a hand through his hair. Looks like it. But why wasn't he flagged as missing? No clue. Case was marked internal only. No media alert. No amber. Just vanished. They stared at the wall in silence. Then Rachel said, I need to find the caseworker. The next morning, Rachel drove to an old building tucked behind a government center in North Columbus. The lettering on the door read, Family Youth Services, Records and Archival Access. Inside, a woman with tired eyes and a grey cardigan sat behind a desk full of files. Her name tag read, Margaret Green. I was assigned to Noah Hollis in 2019, she said slowly, flipping open a thick manila folder. And yes, I remember everything. Rachel sat forward. Can you tell me what happened? Margaret nodded. He was placed in emergency custody after an incident involving his biological father, Martin Hollis. Turned out the man had a sealed abuse record from another state. But the courts didn't catch it when he filed for custody. You're saying, Rachel said, they gave the boy to a known abuser? Margaret gave a bitter chuckle. Wouldn't be the first time. Paperwork buries red flags better than any criminal ever could. And Grace Rains? Rachel asked. She's listed here. His half-aunt, Margaret said. She tried to intervene, said she'd raise him herself. But she didn't have legal standing, no housing, no job. No family support. We couldn't give her custody. Rachel shook her head. So the courts gave him back to the father. And then they both disappeared, Margaret finished. A few weeks later, never seen again. But you think Grace took him, Rachel said. Margaret looked away. I don't think she kidnapped him. I think she rescued him. Rachel stood in the parking lot outside the building, arms folded, Shadow sitting quietly beside her. So now she knew Noah's real name. Noah Hollis. She whispered it aloud once, trying it on her tongue like a name long buried. Not a John Doe. Not just the boy in the suitcase. He had a name. He had a past. And someone had loved him enough to erase everything just to keep him safe. But why put him in a suitcase? Why now? And more urgently, who else knew? The rain started just after dusk. Officer Rachel Carter sat alone on her living room couch, lights dim, Shadow snoring softly on the rug nearby. The photo of the boy, Noah Hollis, rested on the coffee table beside a folded drawing and the small pink sock from the box left on her porch the night before. She stared at the words written in black marker on the back of the photo. I kept him safe. Now it's your turn. They weren't threatening. They were a passing of duty. But what kind of woman leaves a traumatized child in a suitcase and disappears into the fog? Rachel didn't know yet, but she was about to find out. The next morning, Detective Logan Pierce called from the field. I think I've found something, he said. You're going to want to see this in person. An hour later, they stood at the edge of the Oak Ridge Trail, just 2 counties east of Riverston. Logan pointed through the tree line. About half a mile in. Rachel adjusted her vest and nodded. Shadow moved ahead of them, his nose twitching, body low and focused. The air was damp, filled with the scent of pine and ash. 20 minutes later, they reached it. A burned-out cabin, swallowed by vines and shadows. The roof had partially collapsed. The inside was blackened, charred up to the beams, soot streaked across the walls like claw marks. But it wasn't what was destroyed that caught Rachel's eye. It was what had survived. Pinned to one wall were children's drawings, stick figures, flowers, a small boy and a dog with a big tail. Noah and Scout. It was his home, Rachel said softly. Logan nodded. Fire crews said it looked like paper and fabric were deliberately burned, no accelerants, maybe to erase evidence. Or memories. Rachel stepped over a scorched floorboard and noticed something in the corner. A hand-drawn calendar, pieced together from notebook paper and medical tape, with stickers on each day, stars, hearts, smiley faces. But the final square was empty. No sticker, no mark, just a blank space. She was tracking something, Logan said. Habits, routine. Maybe therapy? Or maybe, Rachel murmured, counting down to the day she'd have to leave. Back at the cruiser, Rachel spread the evidence out on the hood of the car. She was here, she whispered, raising him, teaching him, keeping him safe. Logan added, and then something spooked her. Rachel looked out at the woods. She didn't run because she was reckless. She ran because someone found them. That night, Rachel returned home to find another envelope in her mailbox. No postage, no return address. Just her name. Inside was a photograph. It showed Grace Whitmore, the woman from the surveillance photo, now confirmed as Noah's guardian. She stood in a field of wildflowers, smiling gently. Beside her was Noah, holding her hand, barefoot and beaming. The back of the photo carried just one line, in looping handwriting. He called me Mama. But I wasn't just someone who tried to be. Rachel stared at it for a long time. Not a confession, not a goodbye. A surrender. The next morning, she pulled up every public record on Grace Whitmore. Nothing. No driver's license, no bank account, no medical insurance. No social media, no digital footprint. It was like she had scrubbed herself from the world. But Rachel wasn't starting from zero. She had a photo, a boy's memory, and a drawing of a small blue house in a field with a dog named Scout, and she had Shadow. At the hospital, Noah was finally starting to sit up in bed. He still didn't speak much, but he smiled softly when he saw Rachel and reached automatically for Shadow, who trotted over and nuzzled his hand. Rachel took out the drawing from the box and placed it in his lap. "Did you draw this?" she asked. He looked at her, then back at the paper. His fingers brushed over the crayons. "That's you, isn't it?" she asked. "And the dog?" Noah hesitated, then whispered, "Scout?" Rachel nodded. "Was Scout your dog?" Noah shook his head. "No," he said, voice cracking slightly. "He was hers. But she let me ride on his back sometimes. Said it was okay. Said he was old but still strong." Rachel swallowed hard. "She sounds like she really loved you." Noah blinked. Then finally he said, "She kept me safe." Later that day, Logan called again. "You're going to want to sit down," he said. "What is it?" We traced the route from the bus Grace may have taken. Hikers reported smoke from a remote area, Ravens Hollow. Deep woods, no cell towers. Off-grid. Rachel's pulse quickened. "You think she's still there?" "Hard to say, but if she left the boy at the station and followed up with those messages to you, she's still watching." That evening, Rachel returned to the hospital with a new backpack and some children's books. One of them was a worn copy of Scout and the Big Brave Day. She handed it to Noah. His eyes lit up. He touched the cover like greeting an old friend. Rachel knelt beside him. "You know," she whispered, "we're trying to find her." He looked up. "Do you want to see her again?" Noah nodded. But then he whispered something so soft it was barely audible. "Only if she's safe." Rachel blinked. "You mean you don't want her to get in trouble?" He nodded again. That's when she understood. He wasn't afraid for himself. He was afraid for Grace. That night, Rachel stood in her backyard, Shadow beside her, wind rustling through the leaves. The moonlight filtered through the trees, and in the silence, a single thought echoed in her mind. She didn't run from the law. She ran from a system that wouldn't listen. And now? Now she was waiting, watching, and hoping, just like Rachel was, that someone would finally understand why she had done what she did. The gravel crunched beneath the cruiser's tires as Rachel Carter pulled up to the trailhead in Ravens Hollow. There was no road sign. No reception, just trees, miles of towering pine and cedar closing in around a narrow, worn footpath. Beside her, Detective Logan Pierce double-checked the GPS, which had died 10 minutes ago. "No signal," he muttered. "Didn't think there would be," Rachel replied, reaching for her vest. "She picked this place on purpose." From the back seat, Shadow sat upright, ears perked, tail still. Rachel noticed the way his nose twitched, like he was picking up something the wind barely carried. "Whatever's out there," she whispered, "he already smells it." They began walking. The forest was quiet in the way only remote places can be. No highway hum, no city echo, just birdsong and the soft whisper of leaves rubbing together high above. The trail twisted for about half a mile before opening into a clearing. That's where they saw it. A small, hand-built cabin, patched with tin roofing, moss-covered stones, and old wood that looked salvaged from someone else's ruins. Smoke curled gently from a pipe chimney. Someone was home. Rachel instinctively reached for her holster. Logan raised a hand. "Let's not spook her." Rachel nodded, heart thudding. "Grace Whitmore?" No answer. She stepped forward cautiously. "We're not here to arrest you." Still silence. Then, a woman's voice, soft, raspy, called from inside.
"You can put the guns away. I'm not running anymore." Rachel froze. It was her.
Grace Whitmore stepped into the doorway with her hands visible. She looked exactly like the photo Noah had drawn. Tired, pale, but somehow still gentle. Her hair was pulled into a loose braid. Her eyes were hollow but calm. She wore boots, flannel, and a bracelet made of pink and white string frayed at the ends. "You found him, didn't you?" she asked, not looking at them, but at Shadow. The dog took a slow step forward, then sat at her feet, as if he understood something deeper than words. Rachel swallowed. "He's safe." Grace blinked. "Good," she whispered. "That's all I ever wanted." Inside the cabin was sparse but lived in. A mattress on the floor, a bookshelf with tattered children's stories, a crate of canned food, a bucket of crayons. The walls were covered with drawings, Noah and a dog, a blue house, a field of flowers. "He loved to draw," Grace said softly. "I kept every one." Rachel looked around, heart aching. "Why here?" Grace sat down, folding her hands. "Because the world didn't want us." She glanced at Logan. "They gave him back to a man with a history of abuse." I begged, I pleaded, but I wasn't anyone that mattered on paper. So when Martin Hollis disappeared with him, I followed, and I took him before something worse happened. Rachel lowered her voice. "So you raised him here? For 5 years?" Grace nodded. "We had our routines. I homeschooled him. I taught him to cook, to read. He called me Mama. I wasn't really, but I was the one who stayed." Logan leaned forward. "Then why leave him in a suitcase?" Grace's face fell. "I never wanted to," she whispered, "but someone had started following us. A man-thin, quiet. He knew things. About Noah, about me. One night I found a footprint outside the cabin. Another time the lock was tampered with." Her voice cracked. I panicked. I knew the system would never believe me, so I did the one thing I thought would guarantee someone found him fast. Rachel's throat tightened. "You picked a place where a K9 unit would patrol." Grace looked at Shadow. "I remembered seeing him at Riverstone once. The old dog with the soldier's eyes. I knew, if anyone would sense him, it would be Shadow." They stayed for over an hour, recording her statement, quietly, respectfully. No handcuffs, no interrogation, just truth. Before they left, Grace walked outside and looked to the trees. "You think they'll take him away from you again?" she asked. Rachel hesitated. "We're trying to keep him with people who love him." Grace smiled sadly. "He deserves a life that doesn't have to be hidden." She handed Rachel a small paper envelope. "I left this at a clinic in Marlow months ago. It's the only contact I ever trusted." Rachel opened it. Inside was a post-it with a 10-digit phone number, scrawled in tight handwriting. Beneath it, a single line. "In case I don't come back." 2 days earlier, Rachel had visited that same clinic in Marlow. A tired receptionist named Cassie remembered Grace. She came in 3 times, called herself Willow, said the boy was her nephew. He had bruises, old ones. She cried when we asked if she needed help. "Did she leave any information?" Rachel had asked. Cassie hesitated, then handed over the note. Just this. Now Rachel knew where it had led, not to a fugitive, but to a woman who did everything she could to protect a boy no one else was looking for. Back in Columbus, Rachel filed her report. It wasn't standard, but it was honest. Grace had acted out of fear, but also out of love. She wasn't trying to escape justice. She was trying to outrun a system that had failed once already, and Rachel wasn't about to let it happen again. That night, at the hospital, Noah sat up in bed as Rachel entered with Shadow. She knelt beside him and pulled out something from her coat pocket, a crayon drawing she'd taken from Grace's cabin. "Do you remember this?" she asked. Noah nodded.
touching the paper softly. "She drew that one," he whispered. Rachel smiled. "She misses you." "Is she okay?" he asked. Rachel took his hand. "She is. And she told me to tell you something." "What?" "She said," Rachel whispered, "you were her brave boy. And she was never prouder than when you whispered scout and reached out for help." Noah smiled, just barely. Then he said something Rachel would never forget. She said if I was ever scared, to look for the dog with the eyes that remember. She looked at Shadow, curled at the foot of the hospital bed. "He remembers," she whispered, "and so do we." The file was thinner than Rachel expected. Tucked inside a dusty cabinet in a government building most people forgot existed, the case file on Martin Hollis, Noah's biological father, was only 12 pages long. But 12 pages were enough. Enough to feel the crack in your chest widen. Enough to know that Grace Whitmore hadn't run from the law. She'd run from a system that refused to listen. It started with a sealed abuse report from a neighboring state filed 6 years earlier by a different woman, dismissed without criminal charges, buried under a confidential header. When Martin moved to Ohio and petitioned for custody of his son, no one flagged the record. No one asked questions. The family court granted him full guardianship, citing his desire to reconnect with his son after personal hardships. Rachel's stomach churned as she flipped through the notes. There were red flags, plenty of them. Unexplained bruises during visitation. A withdrawn toddler who stopped speaking when returned to his father's home. And then, Grace's letters. Handwritten pleas to the caseworker. Begging them to investigate. Promising she'd take Noah even without help, even if she had to do it alone. And finally, a final note scrawled in frustration by the assigned social worker. Relative continues to escalate without legal standing. No further action at this time. No further action. Just silence. Until the day Noah disappeared. Rachel sat in her cruiser outside the hospital, staring down at the folder in her lap. Shadow rested in the back seat, his eyes half closed, ears still flicking at every sound. Inside the hospital, Noah was sleeping. Safe. Outside, the weight of everything unsaid pressed against her chest. She had seen broken systems before. But this? This was personal. Later that evening, Detective Logan Pierce joined Rachel in the conference room at the precinct. A corkboard was now covered in photos, timelines, and one central headline in red ink: "Who failed Miles?" Logan dropped a manila envelope on the table. "What's that?" Rachel asked. "Whistleblower report," he said, "from Inside Family Services. Someone submitted it anonymously. But they included a full internal audit, emails, deleted case notes, missed warnings." Rachel flipped through the contents. It was all there. A report confirming Noah had been returned to Martin Hollis despite serious concerns. Documentation that Grace Whitmore had offered to foster him, even without compensation. Evidence that the judge overseeing the custody case quietly retired last year without explanation. Rachel leaned back in her chair. "They buried him," she whispered. "Paperwork and fear and incompetence. They buried that kid alive." Logan nodded. But Grace dug him out. The next day, Rachel met with the new director of Child Welfare Services. The room was quiet, tense. Rachel placed the folder on the table between them. "I'm not asking for your permission," she said evenly. "I'm asking you not to stand in the way." The woman across from her, a tired administrator with sincere eyes, studied the file carefully. "We've opened an internal review," she finally said. "There will be consequences. Some people will lose their jobs." "And the child?" Rachel asked. "We're recommending that Noah remain in temporary foster care, preferably with someone he trusts." Rachel didn't flinch. "He already calls me Dee. He already sleeps with my dog at his feet." The woman nodded. "The Sunni Tidines." "Then let's make that official." That evening, Rachel returned home.
She unlocked the front door to the sound of laughter light, small, hesitant, but real. Noah was curled on the floor beside Shadow, stacking wooden blocks.
When he saw her, his face lit up. "Hi, Dee," she smiled, setting her keys down. "Hey, buddy." "You hungry?" He nodded. "Can we have grilled cheese again?" "Absolutely." He followed her into the kitchen, Shadow padding beside him like a quiet guardian. As she toasted the bread, Rachel glanced at the fridge. A new drawing was taped there, a blue house, a yellow sun, and a dog with big ears sitting on the porch. She added a sticker to the corner. Safe. The courthouse wasn't the kind you saw on television. There were no cameras, no jury box, no shouting lawyers, just tired benches, old carpet, and the quiet hum of fluorescent lights that never turned off. Grace Whitmore stood at the front of the courtroom in a grey sweatshirt, hands cuffed loosely in front of her. Her hair was pulled back. Her voice was steady. "I didn't take him to hurt him," she said. She didn't cry. She didn't beg. She just told the truth. "I took him," she continued, "because no one else would listen. Because I knew if I left him there, he wouldn't survive." In the back row, Officer Rachel Carter sat beside Noah Hollis. The boy was clean, fed, dressed in jeans and a soft blue sweater. He gripped Rachel's hand tightly, not like he was scared, but like he needed to know she wasn't going anywhere. At their feet, Shadow, the dog who had started it all, lay quietly, tail flicking against the floor with every sound. The prosecutor didn't push for jail time. Even they had read the file. Even they had seen the bruises. Instead, they recommended leniency, a psychological evaluation, and a formal investigation into the state's mishandling of the original custody case. The judge nodded solemnly. "Miss Whitmore," he said, "you acted outside the law, but you did not act without reason." He paused, then turned to Rachel. "There is the matter of the child's placement," he continued, "currently in temporary custody, but the board has noted your role in his recovery." Rachel sat up straight. "I'm sorry?" she asked. The court-appointed advocate beside her smiled gently. "You've been with him since the beginning," she whispered. "The department is willing to consider your home, if you're willing to foster him until final placement." Rachel looked down at Noah. He looked up at her with wide, open eyes. She didn't even need to speak. He nodded once, like he already knew what she was going to say. 2 weeks later, Rachel stood in her kitchen, reading the official letter from Family Services. Approved for temporary guardianship. She set the paper down, exhaled slowly, and looked across the room. Noah was lying on his stomach, coloring on a sketch pad. Shadow was curled beside him, eyes half closed, body relaxed for the first time in days. The house was still small, still quiet, but it was becoming theirs. There were puzzles on the coffee table now, tiny sneakers by the door, a plastic cup in the sink with a crayon drawing taped above it. Not much, but enough to call a home. Grace remained in the background. Released under supervision, no media interviews, no speeches. Just a quiet note passed to Rachel one afternoon through her caseworker. "Tell him I'm okay. Tell him he was never a mistake. And thank you for being the kind of person I prayed existed." Rachel folded the note carefully and placed it inside a drawer beside her badge. One chilly morning in October, Noah and Rachel visited a park on the edge of town. She brought grilled cheese sandwiches and a blanket. He brought a tattered book, Scout and the Big Brave Day. Shadow trotted alongside them, nose in the wind, tail wagging. As they sat in the grass beneath an old oak tree, Rachel watched Noah flip to a dog-eared page in the book. "She used to read this part to me," he said. Rachel smiled. "Want to read it to me?" He nodded. And he did. His voice was quiet, a little shaky, but sure. For the first time, he read out loud without flinching. Later that evening, after tucking Noah into bed and turning on his little ocean sound machine, Rachel paused at the doorway. You scared anymore? She asked softly. He shook his head. Because of Shadow? She smiled.
He hesitated, then said, because I know I'm not lost anymore. Rachel blinked back the tears. She crossed the room, knelt beside his bed, and kissed his forehead. You were never lost, kid, she whispered. You were just waiting to be found. The first real laugh came on a Tuesday. Rachel Carter was vacuuming the living room when Shadowhair, ever-loyal canine partner, suddenly barked at the machine, then ran in wild, slow-motion circles around it like it was an invader from another world. Noah watched from the couch, eyes wide, then burst out laughing. Not a polite giggle, a real belly-deep snorting laugh kind of sound. Rachel froze mid-vacuum. Shadow paused too, tongue lolling from the side of his mouth, tail wagging like crazy. Noah laughed harder. Rachel smiled. It was the first time she'd heard that sound from him. Joy. Unfiltered. Loud. Alive. And for a second, the room didn't feel like a holding place between past and future. It felt like home. By week 3, Rachel stopped calling it fostering. Not aloud, but in her heart. She bought a new backpack for Noah. Let him pick his own lunchbox. He chose one with dogs on it, of course. Shadow walked with them every morning to the corner before school. He'd wait patiently at the gate, tail sweeping the sidewalk, until Rachel returned. Noah always looked back, always waved. Rachel always waved back. It became their thing. Little rituals. Safe moments, pieces of peace. The drawings changed too. In the beginning, every sketch had something locked or hidden. A suitcase, a closet, a dark forest with no doors. Now, they were different. One showed a field with a blue sky and a yellow sun. Another showed a house with flowers in front and a dog on the porch's tail mid-wag. Rachel recognized it immediately. It was their house. Their porch, their dog. She didn't say anything. She just quietly taped each drawing to the fridge like medals of progress. One evening, after dinner, Rachel pulled a small plastic box from the hallway closet. Hey, Noah, she said. Want to see something? He nodded. Inside the box were old medals, patches, photos from Rachel's time in the army. She showed him one where she stood in uniform next to a much younger Shadow, both of them dusty and tired, but proud. That's us in Afghanistan, she said. Noah leaned closer. Was Shadow a hero? Rachel looked at the dog, who was now curled up with his chin on Noah's slipper. He still is, she whispered. Later that night, as Rachel was finishing dishes, she heard soft footsteps behind her. Noah stood there in his pajamas, holding something. It was a folded piece of notebook paper. He handed it to her without a word, then ran back down the hall. Rachel opened it. A drawing. 2 stick figures, one taller, one small. Between them, a dog with a big tail and pointy ears. And above them, scrawled in a child's handwriting, me plus D plus T. She didn't cry right away. She just stood there, heart aching, as warm water ran over her hands. Later, she slipped the drawing into a frame and placed it on the shelf beside her badge. Shadow began sleeping at the foot of Noah's bed every night. Sometimes the boy would whisper to him in the dark, things Rachel couldn't hear. Things she didn't need to. The dog always listened, and when Noah had a nightmare, which still happened, sometimes Shadow would climb onto the bed, rest his head near the boy's chest, and stay there until morning. No barking, no growling, just steady, loyal breathing. Like a heartbeat that never left. At the end of the month, a therapist assigned by the court visited their home. She asked Rachel how things were going. Rachel answered honestly, he doesn't say much, but he listens. He eats better, sleeps deeper, and he hasn't drawn a suitcase in 3 weeks. The therapist smiled. That's healing, she said. Quiet healing is still healing. She looked toward the hallway. where Noah and Shadow were playing with wooden blocks. Sometimes, she added, all a child needs is safety, and someone who stays. That night, Rachel tucked Noah into bed.
Did you know, she said softly, that Shadow didn't bark for a whole year after we retired? Noah blinked. He just stopped, like he thought his work was done. She brushed his hair back gently. But when he found you, it was like something woke up in him again. Noah whispered. Like me? Rachel smiled. Yeah, like you. He turned onto his side, pulling the blanket close.
Good night, Dee. Good night, buddy. As Rachel stood to leave, Noah added one more thing, quiet, but clear. Thanks for finding me. Rachel stood in the doorway, her hand on the frame. You weren't lost, kid, she whispered. You were just waiting to be seen. It started as a whisper. A small leak. A quiet tip. An anonymous envelope left on the desk of a junior investigator inside Family Services. But the truth, once spoken, doesn't shrink back into silence. By Thursday morning, it was headline news. State agency under investigation. After sealed abuse files linked to child abduction case, mother figure or fugitive. New evidence shifts public opinion in Grace Whitmore case. The media had caught on, and for once, they got it mostly right. Rachel Carter turned off the TV and stood in front of her living room window, coffee in hand. The air outside felt lighter somehow. Like after a storm. Noah was in the kitchen, drawing as usual. This morning it was sunflowers and pancakes. Shadow lay under the table, tail flicking gently, every few seconds, his silent way of keeping watch. Rachel's phone buzzed. Logan Pierce. You ready to testify? He asked. I've been ready since the day we opened that suitcase, she replied. That afternoon, Rachel took the stand, not in a criminal trial, but in a legislative hearing. A formal inquiry had been launched into the state's handling of the Noah Hollis case. Lawmakers, lawyers, and community advocates filled the room. Some were angry, some embarrassed, some just tired. Rachel spoke clearly. She told them about the bruises no one documented, the sealed files no one opened, the letters Grace wrote that no one answered. And the boy quiet, broken, and curled inside a suitcase who should have never ended up there. I'm not here to defend breaking the law, she said. I'm here to remind you why Grace broke it. She looked around the room. She didn't run from justice. She ran from our failure to protect a child. There were no objections, just silence. Then nods, then movement. The next day, charges against Grace Whitmore were formally dropped. The agency that ignored her pleas, now under full federal audit. The judge who awarded custody to a known abuser, quietly retired, his record under review, and Grace, she didn't celebrate. She didn't smile for cameras. She simply asked, "Can I see him?" With approval from the caseworker and a trauma therapist, they arranged a quiet meeting at a park on the edge of town. No press, no crowd, just two people once torn apart by red tape and fear finding their way back through sunlight and silence. Grace brought a tattered copy of Scout and the Big Brave Day. Noah didn't say much. He just ran to her, held her tightly, then stepped back and whispered, "You did keep me safe." Grace blinked, eyes wet but steady. "I tried, baby," she said. "I really tried." Rachel watched from a bench nearby, Shadow's head resting on her leg. It wasn't a storybook ending, but it was real. And in the real world, sometimes that's more than enough. A few weeks later, Rachel was invited to speak at a town hall event. She didn't like microphones. She wasn't big on applause, but she went for Noah. For Grace. For every child who didn't make the headlines. The mayor fumbled with his notes and tapped the mic awkwardly. Today we recognize Officer Rachel Carter and K9 Shadow for extraordinary service and quiet heroism. But more than that, we recognize the power of following your gut and the bond between a boy and a dog who simply refused to give up on each other. The crowd rose. Rachel didn't take the mic. She simply knelt beside Shadow, straightened his new collar, and whispered, "You saved him. You saved us both." That night, after the lights had dimmed and the cheers faded, Rachel tucked Noah into bed like she always did. "Hey," she asked softly, "you still scared sometimes?" He shook his head. "Because of Shadow?" she asked, smiling. Noah thought for a moment, then whispered, "Because now I know I'm not lost anymore." Rachel leaned down, kissed his forehead, and replied, "You were never lost, kid. You were just waiting to be found." Spring came late that year. The air stayed crisp. Rain clung to the windows like it wasn't ready to let go. But inside the small blue house on Cedar Lane, life was finally blooming. There were fingerprints on the fridge now, a backpack by the door, tiny socks that never quite matched, and soft, unexpected laughter drifting through the hallway like birdsong. It was official by early April. Rachel Carter stood outside the county clerk's office, a thick folder in one hand and Noah's small fingers in the other. The woman behind the desk had smiled and said, "Congratulations, Officer Carter. Guardianship approved." Just like that. She wasn't just a protector anymore. She was family. Noah didn't say much as they walked out to the car. But as she buckled him into his seat, he whispered, "Do I still get to call you D?" Rachel smiled, brushing a curl from his forehead. "You can call me anything you want, buddy." He grinned. "Even boss?" She raised an eyebrow. "Let's not push it." That night, they celebrated the only way they knew how. Grilled cheese sandwiches, chocolate milk, and a worn copy of Scout and the Big Brave Day read aloud under a blanket fort. Shadow lay at the entrance like a sleepy gatekeeper, snoring just loud enough to make Noah giggle. When the story ended, Noah looked up and asked, "Is this forever now?" Rachel paused, then nodded. "Yeah," she said, "it is." In the weeks that followed, their home grew in small, invisible ways. A calendar appeared on the fridge with star stickers on school days. A growth chart was taped to the pantry door. Noah insisted on measuring every Sunday. Rachel caught him once standing on tiptoe to try and beat last week. He didn't think she noticed. But she did. She noticed everything now. The way he'd stop to pet Shadow on his way to breakfast. The way he'd hum when he was nervous. The way he no longer flinched when the wind slammed the door. One afternoon, Rachel came home to find Noah on the porch with sidewalk chalk in his hand. He'd drawn a house, a big tree, a stick figure with curly hair, and a dog with a wagging tail. At the top he'd written, "Home." No arrows, no suitcase. Just that word. Rachel crouched beside him and traced a heart beside the drawing. "You forgot something," she said. "What?" She drew another figure next to the others. "This is me." Noah smiled and handed her the chalk. "You should draw a sun too," he said. She did, and it stayed there for weeks until the rain finally washed it away. A few months later, a new case reached Rachel's desk, a child in crisis, a system still learning from its mistakes. As she read through the file, she felt a tug on her shirt. It was Noah, holding up a snack for Shadow and a note he'd written in wobbly letters. "Tell the next kid they're not alone." Rachel didn't cry easily, but that note, that one, got her. One Sunday evening, as golden light spilled through the curtains, Rachel sat on the couch with a cup of tea. Noah curled up beside her, head on her shoulder, already half asleep. Shadow was snoring under the coffee table, paws twitching like he was chasing something in his dreams. Rachel looked around the room at the crayons on the rug, the dog-eared books on the shelf, the mismatched socks on the radiator. It wasn't a fairy tale. There was no castle, no crown, no magic wand. But there was peace, and love, and second chances. And that, she thought, might be even better. In the years to come, people would forget the headlines. They'd forget the outcry, the hearings, the press releases. But the boy, the dog, the woman who trusted instinct over protocol, they'd remember each other. And every time a new child was saved because a system had finally learned to listen, every time someone asked Rachel why she did what she did, she'd look at the boy beside her, the dog at her feet, and say, "Because they found me too." Life lesson. When systems fail, love steps in. In a world where paperwork can bury pain and silence can erase a child, this story reminds us of a simple, powerful truth. Love pays attention when the world looks away. Noah wasn't just rescued by law enforcement, he was saved by instinct, by a loyal dog's growl, and by a woman who listened to what others ignored. For older Americans who've seen systems rise and fall, the lesson here isn't about blame, it's about showing up. When institutions falter, it's the steady hands of neighbors, guardians, and quiet heroes that restore what's been lost. Rachel didn't plan to become a mother. Grace never signed a paper saying she was one, but both chose to protect a child the moment they were called to. And Shadow 2, old for duty, yet still alert, showed us that even when our season seems over, purpose finds us again. So wherever you are in life, know this. You don't need a badge to save someone. You just need to stay, to care, and to see what others overlook. Sometimes that's more powerful than any system ever built.